Meanwhile, presidential primaries in 5 states are underway right now, and we may learn how deep the bad blood runs between Mitt Romney and his conservative critics. Romney's expected to sweep all of the states today, but as NBC's first read points out, quote, it's the first primary day where Romney does not face any real competition. So when we watch the returns, we'll get a good idea of the true anti-Romney vote tonight. Does he get at least 50%? And all of these contests, what about 60? How about 70? Joining me now, nationally syndicated radio talk show host and MSNBC contributor Michael Smerconish, and Steve Deace, a nationally syndicated radio show host who's still endorsing Newt Gingrich and has been very vocal that I think you said God or someone would have to tell you to vote for Mitt Romney before. So, Steve, I'll start off with you with your strong words. We're watching tonight to see if there's this anti-Romney protest vote. What are you expecting?
I suspect you will see it, but it'll be more subtle than just looking at percentages. I think you've got to look, Tamron, at the turnout model. For example, in Virginia, the one state where Romney didn't have any competition because of ballot issues, except for Ron Paul, almost 10% of Ron Paul's total popular vote in this primary came from one state, Virginia, when he got to go one-on-one with Romney. In fact, Romney finished with 40,000 fewer votes than Mike Huckabee got in the 2008 Virginia primary when he finished second. So I think what you want to look at is the turnout model, and then also at the convention level. For example, in Iowa and Minnesota over the weekend, Ron Paul's people made a very strong show of force. He looks to me like he's poised to actually win those states, which were non-binding caucuses that are determined at convention. How many of those states can Ron Paul and his people flip like Iowa and Minnesota down the line?
And Michael, one of the primaries, your home state of Pennsylvania, do you anticipate or even hear from people regarding a protest vote, or is this just some storyline that's floating out there and doesn't mean anything?
Tamron, it's a pretty quiet day in Pennsylvania today. Without Senator Santorum competing at the top of the ticket, we have a U.S. Senate nomination battle going on to select a candidate who will square off against Bob Casey. But frankly, it's been a very quiet race. Who comes out in primary elections? Those who are most passionate. For the Democrats, they tend to be liberal, and for the Republicans, they tend to be very conservative. So I do think that you will see something that you could regard as a protest vote. Just keep in mind the nature of the primary voter. They're usually pretty conservative folks.
But we also know that today Pennsylvania is the only battleground state, only swing state where we'll be really looking at to glean some kind of information, at least if nothing else, Michael, on enthusiasm or lack thereof.
Well, I think that's true, and I think, Senator Santorum, although I never believed he would win this primary, he still has a hard core of support in some of the more conservative areas of the state. So I'm sure there'll be a double-digit showing for Senator Santorum. Do I expect Mitt Romney to garner 70% of the vote in the Commonwealth tonight? I don't.
All right, and we're still waiting for Mr. Santorum to come out and endorse Mitt Romney, which he's yet to do, which is also very interesting. Let me change, and speaking of change, to what many are calling the pivot, Steve, of Mitt Romney. He said yesterday that he would consider a proposal from Senator Rubio on a Republican Dream Act. He also, with the student loan issue, seems to be pivoting away from Paul Ryan's budget proposal, which would have affected or would affect the student loan interest rate. So are we seeing the train continue, as I said, with the primary, but Mitt Romney jumping the tracks and shimmying over to the middle?
Well, what you're seeing, Tamron, and what America is seeing is this is who Mitt Romney has been his entire political career.
Which is why you don't like him as the nominee, right? Which is clearly why.
Yeah, every position, even within a news cycle, everything is negotiable. Imagine all the lame of Bob Dole, but with the integrity of John Kerry. And that's who essentially we just nominated for president. And it's going to be like this all the time. But what frustrates me even more about Romney, he's not even using his own strategy properly. He gets too involved in specifics. If you're going to run on standing for nothing, then at least just ask the American people all the time a simple question. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? If you are, vote for that guy. If you're not, vote for me. If I were Romney, if I wouldn't give any, if I just keep asking that question into the ground for the next 6 months. That's all I would do.
Michael, you buy that as a strategy for Mitt Romney? Chuck Todd pointed out on his show earlier, we saw this slight pivot, if you will, but then later in the day yesterday, Mitt Romney spoke to conservatives, and he went on about repealing health care and bringing back
voter
stop
ID.
Apologizing to America about America, and as you mentioned, the voter ID laws out there that are largely supported by Republicans, including in the state of Pennsylvania where you are.
See, this is the dance that he has to now try and maneuver, because conservatives such as Steve are anxious to hold his feet to the fire and make him be the candidate, the severely conservative candidate that he said he was during the primary season. My suspicion is that that's one of the reasons why Senator Santorum, even though today's Pennsylvania primary day, has yet to embrace Mitt Romney. Sooner or later, you'd expect that he would, but I think that to the extent he pivots, he's going to be held accountable by conservatives, and perhaps they disagree with me in this regard. I think he's got to make an appeal to independent voters, because if he continues to be severely conservative, I don't think he can win a general election.
And to your point, Michael, holding him accountable in what way? What can folks like Steve, and I'll get to your response on it, Steve, but what can they really do at this point other than, for example, today, have a small protest vote?
Well, they could expose every time he now going forward says something that's at odds with that which he said in those double-digit number of debates that we had.
Yeah,
where
but
time
they don't have an option. Other than Mitt Romney, they don't have a counter to this. They've got to go with this guy.
Well, they'll go with him ultimately, but I think that they'll go kicking and screaming, and that the enthusiasm for Mitt Romney will never get to where it needs to be to drive a general election vote. That's the problem.
So, Steve, we're talking about your people and your supporters as if you're not here, so I'll ask you, you'll go kicking and screaming, or will you just go?
I don't think people will just go. I think his support, he's less popular than McCain 4 years ago. I think he's viewed as less honorable than McCain 4 years ago, and we had a lot of issues with John McCain. And I think one thing we have learned throughout history, going back to the 1970s, no Republican has won a general election without enthusiasm among the Republican base. And I believe you, on the course we're on right now, you will see that history repeat itself come November.
All right, Steve and Michael, thank you both for joining me. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.